All right, so I shot you a couple topics I want to hit first. Chat says that they want to talk about Star Wars first.
Star Wars. You
Star
mean
Wars.
specifically the Gina Carano stuff?
Yeah. The Gina Carano stuff.
You shot him on Discord or?
Oh no, I sent them to you the other day on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. You said that you want to. I said I wanted to ask you about the Gina Carano stuff and kind of like cancel culture in general. You said about the. Oh, do you have some
Yeah.
thoughts?
Oh, I hate cancel culture.
All right, we'll get to it. All right. And then you said that you might want to touch on. Oh, is there an incident? Oh, good call, Ironwood. I was just getting to that. You read my mind. All right, Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Andrew. I like to play video games and am more or less on the libertarian side of the spectrum of things now. I used to be a little bit more staunch Republican. Now I'm like more libertarian, and I am not a proponent of the cancel culture.
Fair enough. And the thing that's kind of led to this is we have some pretty differing thoughts on specifically the Gina Carano thing.
Yeah,
Um,
because you sit back on the end of, yo, that was too far, and I sit back on the end going, but hypocrisy shows that both sides have used this sort of language, and I'm like, come on, be equal or don't do it at all, is my opinion.
okay. So do we want to? So for let me kind of lay it out for chat here. This is the first time I've done anything like this on Twitch. So, Iron, what is political philosophy? We'll get to it. We'll do some chat questions a little bit later, Ironword. Don't you worry. So for a little bit of background, Gina Carano, known Star Wars actress and former MMA fighter, has said some cringe shit online. In my opinion, at least, I think we can both agree that like what she said was kind of cringe.
When it comes to her aspect of the Nazi Jew comparison, I'm like, I get it. That's used kind of everywhere now. I'm not as freaked out by that. I can understand why the beep boop bop side of it is, not in good taste. Like, I get why she did it, but that's in poor
Mhm.
taste in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I personally here's my entire view of it. She if she was part of any other franchise or any other piece of media than Star Wars, she would have been fired by
Yeah.
Disney long before this. Heyo, how you doing, Janella? She would have been fired long before this, because I mean, if we're talking about Disney here, right? We've got a company that prides itself and presents itself as progressive, as socially forward, makes effort to draw from black voices, marginalized voices, tries to be inclusive
Huh.
of everyone.
I mean, they do that a lot now. We can also talk
Mhm.
about, how Disney used to be
Uh,
quite another company.
oh yes, certainly. Like I've seen Song of the South. What the fuck?
Not even just that. The earlier cartoons, everything by Walt. Walt was known, anti-Semite and misogynistic. So it was
Oh
like,
yeah.
uh.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, now obviously they try to move further away from that. But I think personally they've moved now a little bit too much to the end of, we're trying to get so far away from that now we just don't like anybody who disagrees with us.
Well, I kind of see it as Disney as a company has a brand, and that brand's purpose is to make money, right?
Oh
They
yeah,
they want to
absolutely.
make a da money. And in order to make a da money, they've got to appeal to as many people as possible. And they
Absolutely.
and they need to it's their corporate responsibility as a company and as a brand to distance themselves from anything that causes public outrage. So this is not the first time that hashtag fire Gina Carano has trended. It's happened.
No,
What's
it's the
that?
first time that it worked.
Well, yeah. It only happens until, or it only trends until it happens, right?
Yeah, well, the first time it happened was for a little while with the trans
Hmm.
joke stuff, and that didn't really take off. And then it wasn't until the Holocaust comparison, or not Holocaust,
Hmm.
beating in the streets comparison that made it them go, okay, this is too far. But
Yeah, we can categorize, instead of Holocaust, we'll call it the treatment of Jews under Nazi Germany, right? I think we
yeah,
can
because that's
we
what
can
it
safely say
was.
that.
Like that's why I sit back and I go to the end of I understand them wanting to go, ooh, bad image. Okay, Gina Carano, stop it. And like we had previously said, though, it's like, okay, but Pedro Pascal made a concentration camp comparison, and that's still bad optics for Jewish people, but that didn't hit as hard. And I'm like,
Yeah, so
okay, but both are still bad optics. You're making a Jewish concentration camp comparison and still the beating in the street comparison. And that's when I step back and go, I get why you wanted to remove the one, but the other still did something that was like, okay, maybe he shouldn't have done that either.
all right, here's my contention, and I think I laid this out when we talked about this earlier. I think Pedro Pascal's here. Let me pull it up for chat here. Pedro Pascal concentration camp. Was it a tweet? I think it was a tweet.
It was a tweet. It was a 1942 concentration camp Jewish photo on top, and then it was a 2018 immigration photo underneath
Yeah,
with
here
the
it is.
ice cages.
I found it. No, I don't want Pedro Pascal's page. I want this tweet. Show me the tweet. Here it is. All right, so here's the tweet for folks. It first of all, it's from June 20th, 2018, so it's an older tweet.
Yeah,
This one
it
says
was accurate
Germany.
to the time in which he posted it.
Yeah, Germany 1944, America 2018. So here's my contention. Here's why I think this one is largely. I would agree. It's not the best optics, especially for a public figure like Pedro Pascal. But I think this one is much more defensible than Gina Carano's tweet, which I already have up somewhere. Here it is. It's been deleted, so I had to go find it.
Well, this wasn't a tweet. This was
It was an
Instagram
Instagram
repost.
post. You're right.
Instagram repost, very specifically there. She shared somebody else's post that she agreed with.
She screenshotted it and put it in her story. I think I'm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it wasn't like a retweet. Like there was some. Not that it matters that much, but it's still an endorsement that she thinks that this is something that she would agree with.
Mm-hmm.
So it says Jews were beaten in the streets not by Nazi soldiers but by their neighbors, even by children, because history is.
Statements.
What's that?
Accurate statements.
Yeah, that's
and I fully get it.
That part's accurate. That's not the part that I have contention with. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? So it is different. Yeah?
I mean, I get what her Instagram post is trying to say, and I also get what Pedro Pascal is trying to say. That's why I sit back and I go, I understand both, and I don't think either, in my opinion, are in the wrong for saying what they believe there. Pedro Pascal is accurate that the cages and stuff being in use, not good. The look of it is quite shitty. And then I understand Gina Carano's side of it because in a lot of ways, the U.S. political spectrum has become very divisive. Where if you're a staunch Republican and have staunch Republican views, you're immediately branded away by certain liberal sides, and same vice versa, where staunch liberals will be looked at in a certain way by the Republican Party, some people in it. So it's like, I understand both, and that's why I sit back going, I don't think either really did anything wrong with what they're posting.
Yeah, right.
I just think it's shitty to constantly use Jewish illustrations to get their point across, because we keep on using the Holocaust as an example, and it's like I get why we default to the Holocaust because it's one of the most
Yeah, it's
well-known tragedies that has happened, but come on, we
yeah,
just
it's
constantly poke at them.
it's Godwin's law. Have you ever heard of Godwin's law?
No.
If you take Godwin's law is essentially if you take any political or socioeconomic discussion far enough, eventually you will talk about the Nazis.
Oh.
Yeah, like
Okay.
it's not like a law. It's more of like a political meme, but like it's called Godwin's law. Eventually, something will get
It,
compared to Nazi Germany and blah blah blah.
it's the same thing with like Murphy's Law. I mean, I get it.
Yeah,
Murphy's Law is not really a law, but
yeah,
it's
it's just a
like
meme.
someone's gonna have it.
So here's so let me lay this out and seem Ironwood. If I mischaracterized it, please do correct me. I'm still a little baby Twitch debate guy. Psycho, I will hydrate that many times later. Don't you worry. So here's what you're telling me right now. So right now we've got two different comparisons. One comparison is between the segregation and imprisonment of minorities in a concentration camp being compared to another country's segregation and imprisonment of minorities in a concentration camp.
Yeah, I mean, two different ways of how we got there, but yeah, still. I see
Right.
what's
It's
going
it's
on.
still those two are similar, right? We can make an
Yeah.
apt comparison and say, "Hey, we've seen this happen before. Maybe we shouldn't, maybe we shouldn't do that."
Yes, and I think with Pedro Pascal's, we're a lot more in the reality of it's actively happening, and hey, we should watch out for that.
Yeah, it's
Whereas,
it's it's a defensible comparison, right?
whereas Gina Carano's, I think, is a hey, don't let this happen comparison. I think hers is more of a setup of we've
Mm,
watched this start happening where where countries have gotten so divisive in their own ideas where they just start attacking each other. Let's not end up back there because
well,
there's more examples than just the Holocaust. You have areas like one of my favorite things to look into to some degree was Cambodia's uprising with Pol Pot. Pol
right.
Pot literally just went through areas, talked to children, talked to young adults, and said, the government is not for you, the government is not working for you, let's take them out. And he eventually got them to turn against the government and then overthrew parts of it and then just started slaughtering people,
Right.
burning books, all that stuff.
We're not. She didn't compare this to Pol Pot. I really want to hammer in on this comparison here. So one of them is between two different countries and models of concentration camp. I think we can agree that they're both types of concentration camps. Both have, I'm not talking about the death camp. So like Auschwitz-Birkenau was a death camp where people died. They also had like concentration and work camps where they would just like hold people and keep them out of society, which is exactly
Yeah,
what they're doing with Mexican migrants. Yeah.
they just had plenty of prison camps where
Mm-hmm.
the idea was you're cheap labor for us now, or you're experimentation fodder,
Yeah, exactly.
because
So the
we
the
had all that.
the second comparison we're dealing with is that people criticizing conservatives for the beliefs that they hold is the same as neighbors beating neighbors for being Jews, for being an ethnic and religious group.
I think you could extrapolate that out farther though than just people criticizing conservatives to the point of look at the BLM riots that had started happening where they were marching up to people at like restaurants and stuff and screaming them down and saying you must agree with us.
All right. That happened. As far as I've seen, that happened the one time, and I disavow
And
that.
I mean,
I'm largely supportive of BLM and Antifa mobilization over the past year or so. That was cringe as fuck. I do not. I don't think white people should go up to people like eating outside in a restaurant and yell at them to like, put their fist in the air. That was stupid as shit.
so I've seen the lady, that's the main one, and then
Hmm.
I've heard stories of a couple times that happened in New York, but there was no videos attached to that. It was just stories of hey, this happened. The police had to break it up.
Yeah,
Um,
I saw there was a lot of misinformation flying around. There were stories that came out of Portland too, and like several Portland journalists have been like, I can't find any corroborating evidence of this. So as far
and
as
then
I've
there's
looked
been
into, I've looked into it pretty substantially. I've been following this and like pulling out because like I know people are going to bring these things up to me when I bring this up in conversations. Like, hey, well, what about these people that got yelled at, or hey, what about this guy that shot this other guy and whatever. So I've been as far as I can tell, that's only happened the one time. There's been other like stupid cringe things that they've done, but we're talking about a government sanctioning the beating and murder and killing of Jews.
yes, but that's not how it started. And
Right.
that's why I look at her post more as a
Do you
I mean,
think
that may be me reading into it more, but that's like me sitting there going, I understand the let's not get back to this point, people, because there is still the talk of when Pelosi has been up on the Hill and saying, fight like hell, give them the damnedest, like, take down the congressman and all that stuff, which Trump has also said equal things, and that's like, what the hell? And then there's been other Democrat leaders saying stuff like that, and then there's been other Republican leaders saying stuff like that, and I'm like,
do you think there
that's
is
why.
do you think
That's
there is a
why I sit
legitimate
back and
risk in
consider
America
it.
of sorry, I'm not meaning to talk over you.
You're good.
Do you think there's a legitimate risk in America that like first of all we're talking about things that people do and say which are indicative of some kind of conservative belief and an ethnic and religious group. So already the comparison is like you can stop saying dumb shit online. You can't stop being an Ashkenazi Jew, you know?
The equal comparison to that, though, to me, would be the fact that Hitler looked at people in the area and eventually became disillusioned to the point of, oh, Jews are the fault. He just happened to
Oh yeah,
pick
certainly.
out a race and go, Jews are the fault. Whereas in
Baselessly, right?
America, too, I think we're gonna.
For absolutely no reason. Other than,
Besides the
I
fact
mean, we
that
can
he
talk
heard.
about the material conditions of Weimar Germany and how they felt disenfranchised and blah 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 blah. We can go
Yeah,
into that, but I don't see how it's illustrative of the point. He targeted them for no conceivable reason other than he needed somebody to blame and they were there, right?
and yes, 100%. He heard it from other people around him, and then that's when it became the idea. I think the problem that you can see in the U.S. would be we already have groups that have already set up, I don't like you for certain reasons. We already
No,
have
no, 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 no. What
things.
reasons? That the reasons are important. What reasons?
The KKK says that they don't like black people due to history. What other
Yeah.
reason do they have besides that they were slaves?
Right. Yeah. I'm the KKK aren't the people who are canceling Gina Carano on Twitter here.
But this is my point of when I looked into her tweet, I was like, okay, I could see her being like, let's not get to this point, because I think it's more of the way that I read it was more of a foreshadowing of let's not get to this point. Let's not get to the point of being so lockstep with your party ideas that you'll eventually just agree that it's okay to go after the other party in any way, shape, or form.
I
That's what I read that more as, because I have seen now on both sides, because we've seen the Capitol riots, which is a Republican-led, takeover, not truly an insurrection, but they were just being straight up assholes.
I know
And
it
that
was
was
definitionally it was an insurrection, but we can get into that later.
but that was the idea, though, that they went in with like the Proud Boys and so on and so forth. So that's a Republican-leaning group, a white supremacist idea group that just like ran in and started doing that crap. And it's like,
Hmm.
you can't be doing that. And then I've seen it on the other end where noted you can bring up history and current things where you have groups like the Black Panthers, who historically have beaten down groups that they don't agree with. And I understand why the Black Panthers were formed, but still.
No, that's not what I mean. That is the large narrative that's pushed about the Black Panthers. That's not what the Black Panthers did. I still need to
There's
watch. There's a movie that came out about Fred Hampton called Judas and the Black Messiah that I really really want to watch. I think it's on HBO HBO
Oh
Max.
yeah, I've seen it coming up, and I've
Mhm.
thought it looked pretty interesting.
But that was the FBI tried to paint the Black Panthers as violent thugs who were going out and beating people up for disagreeing with their political beliefs. What they were actually doing was standing by during traffic stops, armed, to make sure that the police weren't like shortchanging or arresting people for no goddamn reason. And they were also like out like making soup kitchens and giving free breakfast and tutoring to kids.
So I
That
fully understand that there's been Black Panther aspects that are good, and I'm not returning to just like the original ones, because the original ones there wasn't so much of an issue. Like, yes, there was the whole make out of yo, they're evil, but they really weren't that bad. But when you go into the Black Panthers later into history of their
oh, you're talking about
like
like the modern
past
Black Panther Party?
into like the 90s and into the more modern, you've seen them become a little bit more radicalized into the idea of just down with the white man. And now that's not all of them, but you've seen it through some of them.
Yeah, and
There was
it's
a
you get in the 90s you get the added context that like it was the highest possible point of crime like on both coasts in New York and LA. So yeah, there were a lot of that they did get more violent as time went on. And I think it similar to what we're seeing today with groups like Antifa, we have a couple people who are actively instigating violence even if it's like not what the broader movement is trying to push. Things like
BLM's
that.
broader movement is trying to push equality.
Oh yeah,
There's
for sure.
sects of BLM that are just like, I have no problem walking up to a white man and knocking him out.
There are individuals that all ally themselves with the movement who engage in stupid dumb fuckery. Yeah?
Yeah. And that's why when I read her tweet, or her Instagram thing, I didn't read it as like her trying to say boo-hoo conservatives. I read it as like, let's not get to the point of this again, though, where we're letting us become so divided that we agree with more of these people that are just like beat them down for whatever reason.
Yeah, so here's here's where I think the disconnect is between us, right? The left doesn't want people to agree with them because they think that they're ideologically pure. They want people to stop saying shit that's harmful, right? So the context behind this is Gina Carano is a conservative. She's a Republican voter. She in the past has pushed against COVID restrictions and mask wearing, has pushed back against trans people saying like wanting her to use correct pronouns, and like just disavowed the process in general. She spread election conspiracies.
She said that she's gonna identify you as what she sees you as. If she thinks you're a woman, she would say she, because if you come up to her and go, yo, I'm a woman, and you're a dude, she's like, no, you're not. Like, that was her idea into that.
Yeah, and that's cringe as fuck, and she should respect what people want them to call them. Like if you knew somebody as like with like the last name Baker, and
what, you're gonna say that you want to call him Smith?
No. Let's say someone was born with the last. So you grew up with this person. You went to high school with this person. I mean, we don't have to go down this whole road. Say if you knew this person as Baker, you haven't seen him for a while. They come back. They're like, oh, Terry Baker, and she's like, oh no, actually, I got married. My last name is, let's say, Smith. Sure. You're like, no, I know you as Terry Baker. Therefore, I will continue to call you Terry Baker. It's the exact same. It's the exact same vibe.
Yeah, that's why, like, though I don't really stand, like, fully with the trans community in certain aspects, because, there's certain aspects of it where I'm like,
yeah,
hey, let's try to get you more mental health, because too many of you guys are committing suicide, and, yo, I don't want this.
Yeah, this is a whole different discussion that I am fully prepared to have, but I don't want to have in the context of Gina Carano, all right? Gina Carano has said cringe shit online repeatedly and has had calls for her firing repeatedly. And then she posts something saying, how is people canceling me online? I'll use the specific text. How is it any different to hate someone for their political views? How is that different than Jews getting beaten in the streets in Nazi Germany? That I can see why that's a bridge too far for Disney. I can see why that's an issue that's fireable. Because especially if you're a public figure who people look up to, like girls look at Cara Dune, they're like, yay, powerful female character in media, she's dope as fuck, right? And
Hmm.
then she's engaging in like actively in Holocaust denial on Instagram.
Well, not denial, but
Functionally, either she doesn't know or care what happened in the Holocaust, or she's actively engaging in Holocaust denial. Functionally, as far as I'm concerned, because to say, hey, you know, people hating the Jews because they're an ethnic minority and a religious minority is the same as me getting criticized on Twitter.
I mean,
Do you see how that's like downplaying the plight of Jews under Nazi Germany?
absolutely.
They're
And I
not
mean,
getting pulled out into the streets and beaten. They're not getting sent to concentration camps for being conservatives. You can stop saying dumb shit online.
I think it's just two different readings there. If like reading it in like that, absolutely, because like, yeah, that's way too. If you take it down to just the context of her being like whiny like that, I get it. I read it into more and just like I said, into like, let's not get back to this point.
Right. We're not the
But
sh-
my thing, if you're gonna want to get rid of her, you should have gotten one to get rid of her because of
because of the
the
previous cringe shit that
transphobia
she
thing.
said.
Like,
Yeah.
I can understand that way more than the single comparison there. Like the single Nazi comparison, I'm just like, okay, that's been done throughout your ranks. We can go into multiple people in the Disney ranks who have compared different things like that. They're all
the
still around.
the issue isn't comparing something that's happening today to something that the Nazis did. The issue is comparing cancel culture and Twitter canceling to the Jews. Like you can't. It's not bringing up the Holocaust isn't a deal breaker for Disney. It's Holocaust denial that is a deal breaker for Disney.
And I could say on this end that Gina Carano's point was repression of repression. Her ideas have being repressed by some degree by an outside group that's going, hey, cancel her because we don't agree with her.
So
And
let me ask you
then
this.
that happened in Nazi Germany with, hey, get rid of the Jews because we don't agree with them.
Let me ask you
Like,
this.
I get it's broad strokes, but I can make that draw. I don't make the draw though to defending her for the sense of
Yeah,
the
just
transgender
just
wording.
because you can make a reach doesn't mean that we're obliged to do so for the sake of charitability. If I said if I asked you if you believed that we should hear out people in the KKK, that they should have a platform, they should be able to say whatever they want without fear of repercussion from their job, people could just be like out KKK members. Obviously, this is a bit of a stretch. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's fine?
Do I believe that they could have a platform and have their speech? Yes. Do I believe that people should follow them? No, because that's not what I believe
That's
in. But do I
my
believe it's like,
question. My question is, do you think they should be able to do that without fear, like as protected speech? Like you can't protest against them. You can't tell them that their views are stupid as fuck. You can't you can't go
no,
after
no,
them
no,
for it. They
no,
can't
you
get
should
fired
be,
from their jobs.
you should, I get this side of it. Yes, you should be able to. And that's why I understand. And I don't sit back and say Disney's wrong
Hmm.
for firing her. Or technically, it wasn't Disney, it was Lucasfilms, but still. I
Well,
don't sit back
owned
and
by
say
Disney.
that there
Disney
was,
had to sign off on it. I'm sure.
yeah, but I don't sit back and say that it was wrong to get rid of her. I think it was kind of stupid because I think Disney would have been fine keeping her around, but I don't see it as wrong to get rid of her because it's the same thing. Yeah, if a KKK member is actively coming out and saying whatever they want to say, I think their workplace absolutely has the right to be like, "No, you're gone," especially because the KKK preaches
Yeah.
a lot. Well, they used to, not as so much now. They just have a lot more radical sides still, where they preach a lot of straight hate of just like
Hmm.
take them down, don't let them be around. Like I fully get why a company can be like, no, we're not going to have that stand.
Yeah, but so to say, hey, she has said shitty things in the past, and then she made this post that equated her being um, criticized for her beliefs to the persecution of Jews under Nazi Germany. That's the same as Pedro Pascal pointing out that we have concentration camps here now, just like they did in Germany. Those aren't the same, right?
No, they're not the same. But
Mm-hmm.
my point for Disney wanting to get rid of one for saying something Jewish or saying something Holocaust related, it's like they both did. So my thing is just like to get rid of her for the
They didn't
transgender.
fire they didn't
Got it.
fire her for saying something Holocaust related. They fired her for comparing the persecution, quote unquote
Of
persecution of conservative thought to the persecution of Jewish people.
yeah,
They shouldn't fire
they
Pedro Pascal for saying something about the Holocaust. If Pedro Pascal engages in Holocaust denialism, yeah, they should fire him. But he didn't do
wasn't
that.
there wasn't there exact wording the anti-Semitic language that she used, and it's like
Yes. I don't know if they said language, but they did drop anti-Semitic, yes. And I think that it is anti-Semitic of her to make this post.
by definition, anti-Semitic it just means that it's against the religious. It's like I wouldn't say that what she said is against the religious, but it is a
No,
shitty comparison.
no, anti-Semitism isn't just saying I hate Jewish people or like opposing, the ideas the Jewish people put forward. Anti-Semitism, Holocaust denialism, downplaying or denying the events of the Holocaust is a form of anti-Semitism.
The fuck is actually rightfully sitting back and saying that it didn't happen. Like,
What's
that's
that?
just stupid in my opinion.
What'd you say? I didn't hear you.
If you're honestly sitting back and going, the Holocaust didn't happen, you're being clearly very stupid. It's like it bloody happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get a bunch of folks who are like, oh well, they say 6 million. It's obviously more like 2 million, and then the rest just died from the work camps. It's come on.
I don't think it really matters if they died in the work camp or if they died in the chambers. Like
Yeah,
they were still put into hellish conditions and they died.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think Disney was 100% right. I mean, you're a libertarian. You believe in at-will employment, yeah?
Oh no, like I said, I think Disney had every right to get rid of her.
Oh yeah, okay.
I would just call out the fact that they've gotten rid of some people due to saying certain things and then let others stay around is like you got to watch that. Like well, technically he doesn't fully work for Disney. I wish I could remember his name right now.
Or let's say we can back it up to Lucasfilm. We can say Lucasfilm was right to fire them, and we can discuss their standards.
And Lucasfilm, of course, hasn't had too many people leave outside of like just actually leaving. So it's like it's hard to just look at him or them in general. But there's one guy, oh my gosh, I wish I could remember his name, who made a MAGA kids go into the wood chipper head first tweet. And it was like, dude, you can't be saying that. And he's still technically employed throughout the industry, but he only worked on like one Disney movie. It was Beauty and the Beast. He was a producer or something on that. I'm like, really?
Jack Morrissey, Disney producer.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would call for that guy to be fired just as quickly. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's my only sit back is like when it comes to you want to remove somebody for something, I fully get it. I understand why I wanted to remove her. I will also just sit back though and go like, you have other people in your ranks. Watch them too, because they have said things or are currently doing things that it's like this is also questionable.
Yeah,
like,
certainly.
Don't let them run away with their ideas too, because I just sit back and go with the idea of don't let hypocrisy run. Like, don't sit back and be like, oh, well, we got rid of her because we didn't agree with her. But this guy who's saying stuff also, it's like, no, it's got to be both.
Right. Now, let me ask you that just because this is something that people keep bringing up. What are your thoughts on James Gunn?
We initially actually discussed that, if I remember correctly. So, James Gunn obviously being initially fired due to the fact of what he had said in the past, and then being brought back because the actors were like, we don't want to do it without him. My stance behind that is I think Disney had every right to get rid of him and keep him gone if they wanted to.
Over 7-year-old tweets that he'd already apologized for?
Like I said, I feel like they could easily do it. Okay, but by your definition earlier, when you said that they have a brand to protect and an idea to protect, my point would be on this. If you're going to keep him in, you're also taking on his baggage. It's
right.
That simple. It's if you want to keep that baggage with you. Yes, he apologized for it. Yes, his tweets were also heinous. So if you as a company are willing to keep on that baggage, then that's what you're willing to take on. They could have done the same thing with Gina Carano. They have every right to get rid of her, but they could have also kept her and been like, she has a freedom to say what she wants to say. Gina Carano's now been picked up by the Daily Wire for a movie that they're doing. Why?
Yeah,
Because they can agree along with her and take on her image and whatever. So it's like, it's all up to them. It's what
I
they want
think
to take on.
I made it. I made a tweet about that right after it happened. I'm trying to remember what I said. Let me find it. Oh, cancel culture is when everyone tells you you're too bigoted and insufferable to work with, so you have to go work with other people who have also been told they're too bigoted and insufferable to work with. Yeah, it is. Ben Shapiro picked her up because he's a big old free speech warrior, isn't he? And he's like, oh man, she got canceled for this. I've been canceled too. Let's work together.
In a lot of aspects, I don't fully disagree with the Ben Shapiro on certain things. Like, I do listen to some of his stuff, and I listen through, like, other people, like, I follow CNN and so on and so forth, and it's like, I don't have a problem listening to Ben Shapiro because he has no problem reaming anybody. Like, he
Yeah, but
reamed
he's
Trump
also
over
like,
doing stupid shit. He reamed Biden over doing stupid shit. Like,
yeah,
I'm
he,
like, okay, I
but
can vibe with that.
he'll ream Biden on doing stupid shit. He didn't ream Trump on doing stupid shit. He's a
Oh, yeah.
conservative.
No, he did. He called out Trump
Barely.
immediately
The
for
most lukewarm of defenses, giving him like he gives him the biggest benefit. Well, if you look at it this way, he actually when you look deeper into his tweets, it actually says that this is actually what he believes, and he didn't actually think that it was an insurrection, and it was actually like Ben Shapiro has been so wrong about so many things over the years. I don't know how. I mean, I know how he still has a career in journalism. It's because he employs himself.
Ben Shapiro also said, though, like, he made the point that Trump didn't want the insurrection, but he also made the point that Trump should have said something faster and been like, yo, you need to stop.
Trump didn't want the yeah, this is what I'm talking about. He says Trump didn't want the insurrection when he publicized the event for months, brought all of the people there, riled them up with multiple speakers, said we're going to march down to the Capitol. Then they did march down to the Capitol, and when asked whether he should bring the National Guard in, he was like, "No."
I remember the original, though, when he initially said something about wanting to bring in the National Guard that wasn't the first response from, oh my god, I'm going to mess up her name. Her last name's was it Bowser? That's the DC mayor.
Oh yeah, Mayor Bowser.
Yeah, I remember like when that initially started happening, that
Yeah,
somebody
she asked
somewhere
she
tried
asked to
call the
mobilize.
National Guard.
She asked to mobilize the well her jurisdiction is the DC police. The DC Metro Police answer to the mayor, I think, and the DC National
Yeah.
Guard respond. They respond exclusively to the president. I'm pretty sure it's either one way or the other. But I know Mayor Bowser
I
mobilized.
think he controls the police and
Mhm.
is basically the government controls the National Guard. And I
Mhm.
remember she asked for it, and they kind of were just like, "Nah."
Yeah, the Department of
Like,
Justice
what?
was like, no, like immediately, and then apparently, I need to look closer into this, and I'm going to before I talk to the guy on Saturday. But yeah, apparently it was like brought to Trump, and he was like, no. And he also said like he tweeted while they were marching like Mike Pence has failed us. He failed to fulfill his constitutional duty. Da 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 da. And then you had people chanting "Hang Mike Pence." Like to look at all of that and then say Donald Trump didn't want the insurrection. Like this is what I'm talking about. He gives him the most charitable interpretation possible. And then as soon as like Biden has a squinty eye or something, he'll like flip shit.
I will say that Trump only actually tweeted like apparently like 4 or 5 times a day, and it was like the quietest that he's ever been, and that definitely made me go like, okay, well that's obviously fishy.
Yeah, he tweeted that, and then he tweeted the
video
video.
to stop.
Yeah, the video where he was like, no, please, I love you, but stop. Come on, guys.
Yeah, go home with peace.
Yeah, go home with peace. We love you. You're very special. Please stop storming the Capitol. Like, come on. Yeah, we can. I really want to wrap up this. Oh god, that's me. What the fuck? Where's that coming from?
Me.
For whatever reason, my a video from Twitter just started playing randomly. I didn't turn
Yeah,
that
like,
up.
I won't sit back and say, you know, I'm never going to vote for Trump again because I didn't even vote for him in 2020. But, like, do I sit back and think that he absolutely wanted that? No. Do I sit back and think, though, that if it happened that he'd been cool with it? Yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of has that attitude where I'm like, did he officially want that? Nah. Would he
I
be
don't
cool
think-
if it happened? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's accurate to say that he didn't want it because it was like one of his last vestiges of being able to retain power in the presidency.
Yeah.
Do I think he knew that he would be able to get this far? No, I don't think he did. Is it the logical end point to the rhetoric that he put forward? Yes, it absolutely is. So let's move on to kind of cancel culture more generally, not necessarily with Gina Carano. So what? Because I think you started the last time, so I'll kind of start this time. In my view, cancel culture, as conservatives say that it exists, is pretty overblown. It's only it only exists like in the realm of Twitter and people getting criticized for the things that they do and say. Like people aren't getting. I mean, the most notable example is probably J.K. Rowling, who chat knows I have railed against on this channel multiple times.
Her she was anti-trans also.
Anti-trans, yeah. She's like the queen of she's the queen of Turf Island. So when people go after and then she had that whole thing that like she roped Noam Chomsky and a bunch of other intellectuals into. It was like an open letter against the cancel culture mob or whatever, where they were like, hey, you know, the internet is for open debate and it should be kept for open debate, so cancel culture is bad. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, but cancel culture to me, what people call cancel culture is people being held accountable for their actions and the things that they say online, especially public figures.
I saw a meme recently that said that it shouldn't be called cancel culture. They should rename it to consequence culture.
Yeah, 100%. Because when you get canceled, you know, it's people dogpile you online, and you know, hopefully you're like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't say that dumb shit anymore. Depending on like if you're like wrong about something, like J.K. Rowling was, and people are like, hey, you know, actually it's, you know, gender and sex are different things, you know? And she's like, no, by being transgender, you're erasing biological sex. And then again, you're like, no, Joanne, please. This is how it is. And you're like, no, I'm going to write a 7-page manifesto on my website decrying the people who are criticizing me for being wrong about this thing. Like, it's just it's very silly that people are more concerned with getting criticized online, and like people, the real cancel culture / accountability culture, if that's what you want to call it. It's like if you say something racist and people tell your boss, and then you're like, oh no, like you shouldn't have told my boss. I wanted to be racist in private, please.
And again, my whole side behind this, like, I sit back and I just kind of go, okay, so for the sense of full-on speech and what you're allowed to say, I don't think anything should be stopping you from saying what you want to say unless what you're actively saying is trying to hurt people. If what you're actively saying is going to, you know, cause people damage, then you have no right to be saying what you want to say. But if you're not saying anything that's like absolutely going to cause damage to people, then like, what's the problem with saying what you want to say?
Yeah, have you heard of it's called Popper's Paradox of Tolerance. Have you heard of that?
I have not by that like definition. I probably know
similar to what
Yeah.
it says, but not by definition.
So the paradox of tolerance is it's the idea that in order to have a society that is truly tolerant of all people and all beliefs and all speech, there are certain types of beliefs and speech and people who need to be suppressed necessarily in order to facilitate that. So, for instance, people who let's say, since we keep hammering on the KKK, in a fully tolerant society, should we allow people to say things that are actively harmful to black people? Should we allow people to consequence-free hold beliefs that another group in society should not exist or should be subservient to them?
No, like
No, certainly not.
That's why I step back and go, if you're saying stuff that's actively going to cause damage to people, or you're actively calling out threats to a person, race, whatever, then it's like, no, you shouldn't be, you should deal with whatever happens on your back end. But if you're not actively causing something that's going to cause like damage to somebody, I don't think that most people at that point it's the spirit of the debate thing. It's like if she says something that is seen as like, ooh, that's not great, but it's not actively telling you to go beat the shit out of trans people,
right?
Then that's a spirit of debate thing. Like,
well,
I
here's
get how somebody can take up a stance on both things, and I also get how eventually people fall into the end of like, we know more now, and we know how what you were saying is just categorically wrong now, but it takes time and going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with people and studies and so on and so forth to actually hit a point of like, this is what it should be, not just I don't agree with you, so nah.
Yeah, I think so. In the specific case of J.K. Rowling, saying that, I mean, the specific thing that she usually rails against is like trans women using women's bathrooms.
Yeah, because she says that she doesn't want somebody else to join her that actually could be a man.
Right. That's the reductive reading of it, but yeah, sure. Yeah, so considering that social transition is one of the biggest factors in alleviating the effects of gender dysphoria, it is harmful for people to say, "Hey, no, you have to go use, the bathroom for your birth sex."
Mm-hmm.
So it's infringing on a person's right to socially transition. Therefore, it's not. I think it's a bad thing of her to do, especially as a public figure. And to do the cancel culture discourse goes like this: I say dumb thing, the internet at large dogpiles me for it, and I go, well, I must have struck a nerve. Cancel culture run amok. Like you haven't that's what I think one of the things that we talked about on that Facebook thread was like, I forget exactly, like, to be dogpiled for your beliefs, to I think the point that I wanted to make to that before I was like, hey, why don't we just talk about it, is where the cancel culture mob isn't asking everyone to agree with everything that everyone does within their personal belief system. They're not saying to J.K. Rowling, hey, you need to affirm that trans people exist and you need to believe it in your heart of hearts, right? They're just saying, stop saying shit that's harmful to trans people.
Yeah.
So
which is why I step back and I go, that's the mentality that we have to have across the board. We just need to make it so that we just need to have cancel culture not be, I mean, obviously it's not everybody in there, but there is people in there who just take it to such a point though, where it's not just like, hey, you're causing damage to people. They take it to the point of just straight retaliation.
Like what?
Or they'll just start attacking her for how she is and saying, that she's a piece of shit, that she should have never written, blah 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 blah. Like,
Well, yeah, people
don't
are.
retaliate with the sense you shouldn't fight hate with hate.
So you're taking
It's
issue specifically with ad hominem attacks against J.K. Rowling in this specific example.
against anybody that has stuff like this. It's like, don't fight hate with hate. For an example, Rush Limbaugh died today. One of the first things that started
Yes.
trending
Yes.
once the announcement of Rush Limbaugh dying was rest in peace.
Rest in piss. Yep. I posted that meme to my Discord. I crab raved directly before I got on the call with you.
And my exact response to that is, I think that is messed up. I don't care what he said, being, the hatred that he has said, because he has said some things that are not cool. You shouldn't respond with hate to hate on that. I don't agree with Nancy Pelosi. When she dies, I'm not gonna go piss on her grave.
Right.
That's
But
just messed up.
by said things that are not cool, one of the things that you're referring to is making fun of people who died of AIDS.
Oh, I'm mainly referring to Negro speech. You know how many times he
Oh yeah, that too. But like for I'm just picking the most egregious example. Allegedly pulling people's names from obits who were gay men who died of AIDS in the 80s and 90s and reading them on air and saying, haha, you died of AIDS. Yeah, fuck that guy.
Definitely not the nicest thing. And my response to
Yeah,
that is,
fuck that guy. I said the exact same thing. Was it Charles or David Koch that died a couple years ago?
I don't.
It was one of the Koch brothers. Yeah, and you had the exact same outcry online. It's like, yeah, fuck that guy. I'm glad he's dead. Like, we're allowed to. I'm trying to find a tactful way to say this. I think we're allowed to celebrate the fact that someone who is doing active, immeasurable harm is no longer able to do that harm.
Mm-hmm.
And if that comes out as rest in piss on Twitter, fine. He didn't have people come to his house and like pull him out of his house. He died peacefully in his bed after, a multi decades long campaign of racism and sexism and xenophobia and homophobia, and then got to die peacefully of lung cancer in his bed at the age of 70. We're allowed to criticize the guy a little bit. All right, that's my view of it at least.
Personally, I sit back and I just go, I don't want to see any of the hatred there against anybody. That's just me. That's my take on it. Like,
I mean, that's fine.
he died. He's not a great dude. He wasn't the greatest of dudes. Like, he did some good things. He did put money towards certain things. But his overall message can be very destructive in certain aspects. And then, like, I feel the same way about, like, Pelosi in certain aspects. Like, she says certain things that just, like, irritate the shit out of me. But when
like what?
she dies, I'm not going to be going back and going, I'm glad she's dead. I'm just going to be like, okay, it's unfortunate that she passed.
Yeah, like what? What has Pelosi said? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to, similar to the Gina Carano thing. There's a wide gulf between the things that these two people have said and that they might get criticized for posthumously.
She has said similar things to how she's told. Okay, so to take it back to the idea of the insurrection, Pelosi has said things along the lines of get in the face of your senators and make them listen. Get into the face of your congressmen and make them listen.
Yeah, yell at your congresspeople in restaurants.
Yeah, find them, chase them down, yell at them, get to the streets on them, and so on and so forth. And it's like,
yeah,
100%. I
don't
appreciate that mentality. Like, I understand writing to your senator. I understand trying to go to public housing, or not public, like town meetings and so on and so forth, and trying to voice the opinions that way. Like, I fully get that. I don't sit back and think it's a good idea just to run up to anybody, though, that is your constituent and just, like, that you're constituent of and just start screaming them down. Like, I don't care who it is.
I think if you are a public, let's take Mitch McConnell, because this has happened to him several times. Mitch McConnell, another notable one is Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
They both get yelled at in restaurants all the goddamn time. They both get people coming to their house and like banging pots and pans at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it. So when you are completely ignoring your constituency's needs, and like you hold town halls or whatever, and then you don't actually take action on them, you work for your constituents, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the
And they have
constituents
every
are-
right to be angry with you, and they have every right to hold you accountable for the things that you do.
the constituents' response should be, don't put them back in there.
Well, welcome to the channel, Allsight. I'm happy to have you.
That's how I think that though. If you're truly unhappy with that, he shouldn't be getting back in. And just disturbing anybody across the board.
I'm
I
in.
don't care what their stance is. It's just like that to me just strikes a chord where I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous.
In a perfect society, I 100% agree with you. These people would be held accountable at the ballot box. But when you have people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell and like, half of the long-term Republican senators and Congress people, several mayors across the country.
Democrats that sit up there too.
Yeah, 100%. I'm registered Democrat, but I do not support the Democrats most of the time. I think Biden's doing some okay stuff right now, but like in general and in the lead up to the election, even now when Biden said, "Hey, if you get John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock elected in Georgia, $2,000 checks are coming out the door." And then they get elected and he gets sworn in and he's like, "Oh, well, we have some other stuff to do first." And then a couple weeks go by and he's like, "Oh, well, actually it's going to be 1,400 because you already got the 600." And then a couple more weeks go by and you're like, and he's like, "Oh, well, actually it's only going to be for people who are making under 75,000 a year." Like,
because they figured out that they can't do what he said, and it's like, of course.
well, he can. If that's the case, they should have known that and been honest with the American people up front. Like, I will criticize.
Nobody
I will.
ever is, and that stuff.
Yeah, right.
Ever is.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if politicians do shitty things that don't reflect their constituency, they should be held accountable at the ballot box. But the fact is, they don't. People will largely vote across party lines. So if you've got,
and they'll vote retaining. You got constantly voting across party lines and voting retaining, even if the person does nothing for what they want.
Oh, you're talking about just voting for incumbents? People who are already in? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Just like, it doesn't matter if this person has done absolutely nothing for you the entire time or made it worse for you. If they're in your party line and they're already there, you're just going to vote to keep the status quo because that's what most citizens do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think that's why I think if the U.S. would be able to ever do this, but it's not going to happen because none of them are going to want to lose their power, we need to set term limits on both the House and Senate.
There's been, I think, I could be misremembering this. There was a term limit bill that got passed through the House and then died in the Senate.
It's happened a couple
at some point.
times.
Yeah. There's been a couple different times
that have come up in the House to try to do it, and it's happened a couple times where the Senate has tried to start it, and it's gone nowhere. And it's like, of course not, because there's too many people that are just going to step back and go, wait, but that messes with me.
It's because the Republican incumbents would never get elected again. Those seats would never stay Republican if there weren't already incumbents in them. Because the simple fact of the matter is there are more Democrats in the U.S.
Yeah, but you're still talking areas where there is a majority Republican. Like, I don't care about even having the idea of Republicans being the majority there, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, in general, I think it could go across both lines. Like, you have Pelosi's been in the office for almost 40 years, been in offices for almost 40 years. Schumer's been in for almost 40-something years. McConnell's been around for like 30-something. Like, there's plenty of them where it's just like, I don't care what party line you are. I don't care if your state would change or whatever. You need to get like that. Like, we already know pretty much all of the Eastern Seaboard going to go Republican. Or, sorry, not Republican, Democrat. Pretty much all the Western Seaboard the same. A lot of the mid-states go Republican. That's just the reality behind it. You got some states that are constantly wishy-washy. You got some states that go up occasionally here and there. But it's like, that's just how it is. Oh, and I should say, across the Eastern Seaboard, it's technically almost everything will go Democrat except for traditionally 3 states. But one of them has changed, this last one, where it's like, okay, they've now become purple. They've now become wishy-washy.
Yeah, Florida. Let's go,
Actually,
Florida.
Call out Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Traditionally Republican.
Georgia. I'm so happy. Well, you've got to figure in Georgia. So just across the board, more populous areas where you have more. I mean, this is kind of a sidetrack, but we can go down. We got time. In areas where you have more people interacting with each other, more different types of people from more walks of life interacting with each other, people of different races and religions interacting with each other, like you do in these large cities and more populous areas, people tend to be more socially liberal in those areas. Therefore, they tend to vote more liberal. People who are isolated, I mean, where you and I live, it's pretty red most of the time, right?
Yeah, that's why we constantly have Andy Reid in.
Yeah. Did you hear Andy Reid's getting investigated for trying to bring a firearm on the House floor and then trying to pass it to an unregistered colleague when he got caught?
Yeah, and he said that it was a mistake. All that. Yeah, he left his office to go to the floor to vote for something. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
He was carrying his firearm that he said he has for defense because of the threats that they have received, which is accurate because apparently Maryland has like one of the most threatened House and Senate representatives. Like across our state, apparently, like they get constantly threatened by different things. And I don't know if that's because we just have like a-holes in Maryland.
I'll
or if
have
it's
to
just
look
because
into
they,
that.
like-
I can't imagine they get more threats than like Schumer does.
But they were just saying like by state. I remember reading a thing that was like by state.
Okay,
These states are
that might be true. I'll look into that later because that's interesting.
And I was just like, yeah, but apparently he was trying to go down, and then he tried to hand it off to one of his assistants to take it back to the room, to take it back to the
No, it was
state.
another congressman who was standing behind him.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. And the congressman was like, "Yo, I'm not registered," so he ran back and put the thing back in, and then came back and passed through the clearance fine.
Yeah, well,
And yeah, they were like, "Well, why were you trying to bring it on the floor?" And it's like he admits that it was a mistake, and I'm just kind of like,
yeah, he admits that it's a mistake, but he's also taking him and Lauren Boebert and like Marjorie Taylor Greene have been like, you know, hanging with each other. And you've got Lauren Boebert, the I'm going to bring my Glock to Congress lady who refused to go through the metal detector and like forced people to go around her to get in to make their votes. Like, yeah, I have a hard time thinking that it was like, oops, this gun that I have to make sure that I take off of me every time that I go into the House chamber. Oops, I left it on today. Here, take this person who doesn't have a gun license. Like, and then he also tried to, a few days before that, he tried to start a fist fight basically with one of the Texas representatives.
yeah,
Andy Harris is rough, dude. I was so sad when he got reelected.
it's common around this area. Of course,
Yeah.
the person running against him didn't really stand too much of a chance because the person running against him was like the exact opposite of what this area would want.
Yeah, I mean, she got more votes than it was Mia Mason, who I actually.
You should be very specific about this, though, that is a transgender representative.
Why do I need to be specific, and why does that matter? I guess because of the because of the constituency. Because of the constituency.
That's my point of it's against what a lot of people out here would initially just fall into.
But the interesting thing that I found about Mia Mason's campaign, she doesn't really call attention to it.
Oh no, not at all.
I didn't realize I met her twice before I found out that she was trans.
Oh yeah, no, it immediately got called out by the other side because of course it was an immediate like she stands against what we believe in, and that's why I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I'm disappointed about it, but
that's kind of why I've moved more and more away from the Republican Party because like I see no reason to call her out for what she is because of what she is. Like that just seems like a stupid reason to try to discredit somebody.
Anyway, but before all of this tangent to say, yes, I also criticize Democrats for saying and doing dumb shit, and I think that we should harass them when they ignore their constituents. But the fact of the matter is, when you're talking about in terms of fighting for the interests of their constituents, Republicans are way, 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 way worse about that.
In certain aspects, definitely.
Because the Republican Party is the party of austerity, right? The Republican Party is the party of austerity. They implement measures that take money out of the pockets of taxpayers and put it into the pockets of, corporations and businesses.
Yeah, because of the idea of trickle down and it expands the economy and
Mhm.
yada yada yada, and it's like
So when you vote Mitch McConnell into office, even if you're a Republican, say you're a Republican, you support Mitch McConnell, you get him into office, and then you start following what he's doing, and he's shooting down like COVID stimulus packages unless they have like blanket immunity for corporations whose employees get COVID, then I think you have every right to be like, hey man, what the fuck?
yeah.
Because you
I think
can't
this is
very
like,
well.
you have every right to call it out. I just think
Well, how are you going to call it out unless you like find them?
I think the idea of bringing it to them is the risky slope side, because then that's when you can have mob mentality to take over. That's why, like, I don't want to tack down on like the idea of like Twitter and stuff doing it, because that, in my opinion, is where the idea of cancel culture or like consequence culture could kick in and be like, okay, so we have a clear like, you're not doing what we want you to do, you're not doing what we would like, we need to make the voices heard there. But to just roll up to the house is like, okay, this is getting sketch territory, no matter who it is. Because I would be then afraid of what they could do to any of them.
Right, but they haven't though.
You're right.
So
That's
here's
my
the difference,
thought.
and I think this is especially prescient given the 1/6 riot. When you have when you say mob mentality, like the mob mentality would take over, do you think that elected officials have a responsibility to act in the interest of their constituents?
Yeah, that's literally
Yeah,
what you're supposed to
of
do.
course. So if they don't do that, and you're stuck with them for another 6 years in the case of Mitch McConnell,
Yeah,
and they will be in the Senate to further cause damage and further ignore the needs of their constituents for an additional 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? But by mob mentality take over, you mean the constituents of a senator holding them accountable for ignoring them. By, I guess, standing outside their house at 3 a.m. with pots and pans lids, yelling, no sleep till stimulus or whatever.
I think that gets nothing done and just creates a like mentality of pushback. But that's when like
I firmly disagree with you, because that's exactly what folks did during the civil rights movement.
Yeah, and look how many people freaking got hurt during it. Like, don't get me wrong. Eventually, you got lost, but damn.
Yeah, change is a chaotic and hurtful process. It never goes smoothly, but in order to get change, we need people who are willing to do that kind of thing. I'm not advocating for violence, like in the case of the 1/6 riot. That was a case where, if we're making comparisons again, you have one side who's banging pots and pans together outside of Mitch McConnell's house to say, "Hey, do your fucking job," and then you have
that could be his own side. It could still fully be Republicans out there going, "Hey."
Oh yeah, certainly. I'm not saying this is a Republican Democrat thing. I'm saying this is a responsible constituent thing versus, a crazy unhinged thing to do. That is this
constituents.
What?
Irresponsible constituents.
Right, yeah. So when you have people going to their elected representative, in the case of Kentucky and Mitch McConnell, banging pots and pans, or yelling at them at restaurants saying, "Do your fucking job," or in the case of Ted Wheeler in Portland, what did they do to Ted Wheeler? They like yelled at him and threw water bottles at him, I think, a bunch. And then he came out and like got tear gassed by the cops with them during the BLM riots out there, and like just got consistently yelled at like, "Hey, go the fuck home, Ted. You've been tear gassing us for 3 months." Like, I think that is fine. I support that. When you have people who go to Washington to try and overturn the results of the most closely watched and most secure election in history because they didn't like the outcome of it, I think that's irresponsible and hurtful, because if they had run into I know we're probably going to get into the impeachment trial in a little bit, but one of the big things that I think the impeachment trial was valuable for was finding out just how close we got to seeing politicians die. If they had gotten their hands on Mike Pence or AOC or Pelosi or Schumer, I don't think they wanted to have a conversation.
No, they didn't, and that's why I sit back and just go, "Yo, they needed to leave way quicker than what they freaking did."
Mm-hmm.
And in general, it's just like it was so stupid in my opinion. The freaking ride is just like, seriously, this is not how you give a point across. For the sense of also like when you were saying like, what do you do with Mitch McConnell just sitting inside office like that? One, term limits will be awesome. Two, there needs to be a better state way to call into account their elected officials. There needs to be a better way that the state level can go, you're not doing what we want you to do,
Yeah, like
and get them out of office at that point.
yeah, having recall elections would be excellent.
Like, I know that states do have the ability to remove a senator through a similar process of like impeaching a president, but it's like it's never freaking done. And there needs to be a better way to actually have the citizens of the state, a district, for the sense of House of Representatives, or the sense of same thing with like mayors and so on and so forth. If they came down to that, to actually be able to go, you're not doing what we put you in office for. We need to have some level of like, let the people speak again, like you said, like a re-election.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've actually never looked into this. I don't know if there's a process for people to initiate a recall election or like a vote of confidence in a sitting representative.
I don't believe there is. The only way you can call out a senator or anything, any elected official, it always has to be something criminal.
Right, and then in that case, even then, it's litigated by the body that they're sitting in.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, for the sense of, I think for the sense of like senators and stuff like that, it's actually litigated by the state, not by fellow senators.
Yeah, if you're introducing a criminal charge, yeah, but if you're just doing like, because there's things that senators and representatives can do that aren't illegal and wouldn't result in a criminal case, but can still get them impeached. Can you recall a House representative? Let's find out. Because I will forget to Google this later. Recall of legislators and removal of members of Congress from office. Members of Congress can have their services ended prior to the normal expiration of their constitutionally established terms of office by their resignation or death, or by action of the House of Congress in which they are a member, by way of an expulsion, or by finding that in accepting a subsequent incompatible public office, the member would be deemed to have vacated his congressional seat. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a way for constituents to initiate like a recall vote.
No, it's they died, they committed something illegal, or anything along those lines. But there's no way for citizens to just like 3-4 years into a senator to be like, you're not doing what we wanted you to do. You're sitting there and just doing whatever the hell you want. We're not.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think. Sorry, where were we going with this? I got so distracted by I was like, "Ooh, recall elections would be nice."
It was the idea of being able to remove senators or things like that.
Oh yeah, like what do we do if our
their
elected
office.
officials are ignoring us? Especially, I think.
Yes, because we were talking about everybody who's been, disturbed and so on and so forth, and I was going off the idea of like, we shouldn't go up to their house, but we need to have a way to be like, you're 3 years into your Senate term, you're halfway through, and you haven't done anything that we've wanted you to do. We need, as you said earlier, like a vote of confidence on them to be like, does the state still represent them, or have they now been swayed away from them? And I feel like something like that would actually would make people call into question more too, if they want to just give them to stay. Because I think the main problem that you run into with a lot of House elections and Senate elections is if they don't fall on the year that the president election is going, most of the time they're ignored.
Yeah, nobody cares.
And then if it's with the presidential election, all what they're really going and voting in there for is the presidential election. They're not caring about any bill votes that are up. They might vote based off of what they saw for a sign, or they'll vote the incumbent if they know their name because they didn't pay attention to anybody else. And it's just like, we need a better system of getting people to actually know what's in their state,
Yeah.
talking more about what's actually going on in their state, and then we need to have a way to be able to call out people that are not representing their state.
Yeah, and I think that one of the upsides, one of the very few upsides of the era that we live in right now, is I think a lot of people are starting to do that. A lot of people are starting to organize at the local level and pay more attention to like their school board elections and their state officials than they were even in like the 2016 election.
The history was always worse, man. Just remember that.
Say that one more time.
The past was always worse. Like, that's one of my favorite sayings from a YouTube series, from a YouTube channel that I watch. But I'm also like just big into history, like I said, to certain aspects. And it's like, there's no point in the past that you can point to and be like, oh my gosh, this was so much better than what we currently are. No, because there's always something that you can go. The past was always worse.
Well, yeah, certainly. But I think that we can look at specific instances in the past and be like, hey, that was working. Why don't we try that again? There have been points in history like the late 60s with the civil rights movement, like not necessarily with World War II because everyone was just kind of like patriotic. After the stock market crash, there were people who were very politically motivated and very politically engaged. And we've never seen the turnout like we did in the 2016 and 2020 elections. But I think a lot of that is because we have the internet now and people are more able to organize and disseminate information than like handing out leaflets in the 20s,
We just need to be able to watch to make sure the information going out there is not being skewed, but that's always what happens. There's always
certainly, and not to gotcha here, but your boy Ben is one of the more skewed and he's one of the most popular content creators. I think the only online personality who's more influential and gets better numbers than him is maybe Tim Pool.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that Ben has his mentality and his side of it. But that's also why I go out to multiple other things, because there is no one source that is just the truth, or not like a skewing aspect of it to some way, shape, or form. Everybody always takes on a skew to some degree. Your best bet that you get for that is in certain aspects C-SPAN, but that's only because they show you just live feeds. Like, there's nothing else to take away from that besides what you see.
Yes, C-SPAN. I think C-SPAN might be the only unbiased source of media because it's just like congressional video with no commentary.
Well, there is commentary between breaks though, and different things like that. Like, I was watching the impeachment trial to some degree through C-SPAN because I didn't want jump-in commentary and so on and so forth. But every single time they went to a lunch break or a recess or something like that, somebody came on and they spoke. And depending on who it was, you could tell that they took a leaning to some degree, but it wasn't as monstrous as being like, oh, I'm on CNN and I'm taking a mostly left leaning. I'm on MSNBC and I'm taking a hard left leaning. I'm on, Fox News and I'm taking a somewhat right leaning. Or then going into, what's the other one? There's one that's like extremely right. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
It's
mostly an online platform.
Alex Jones.
Wasn't thinking him, but yeah, that works.
Too far? Did I go too far?
You get my point though, that it's like there's very few that are like you can just sit back and be like, the news.
Yeah, and I think so. One of the big things that I've realized is I don't care whether or not someone has a political bent. This is kind of a hot take. I don't care if someone has a political skew because all of us do. All of us are looking through different lenses at the things that we see. But if people are forthcoming with those and say, hey, this is my background, these are the things that I think, these are my beliefs, and now here is this news story that I'm presenting to you so that you can check it against that. I think that's fine. Where I
If
get
they were forthcoming, yeah.
Mhm.
How many news stations purport to be unbiased, and then you listen to a guy for like or a girl, whatever, for like a couple minutes, and then realize you're not unbiased.
I think I definitely know that news stations used to do that. I don't know that there's many. I mean, I don't watch mainstream media like at all, but I don't know that there's many. I would be surprised to learn if like CNN was out here saying that we are the most unbiased source of news, or like we are fully unbiased. I feel like a lot of station, and I have my own problems with the mainstream media for a multitude of reasons. But for instance, there's a guy that I listen to and trust a lot named Robert Evans, who was like a war reporter who now reports on like protest activity, and like he goes out in the streets. He's West Coast based, and he's very forthcoming. He's like, here's the way that I feel about this thing. This isn't necessarily representative of the larger consensus. This is how I feel about this thing. The issue that I have with these people is when they're wrong, when they are provably wrong about things, or they ignore scientific consensus or something, or when there's this interesting phenomenon that Ben Shapiro specifically engages in, and I know Tim Pool does as well. They'll just like, when presented with something, they'll just bring up a question. Like they'll question the source without offering any answers for it, without offering a contrary narrative. So
They'll be like,
in the
"Oh, are
case
you sure
of
about that?" Yeah.
in the case of like Ben Shapiro, like he fucking hates trans people, dude. He'll come out and he'll say, oh well, these people want to use these bathrooms. Well, what about all of the women who have concerns about men coming into their bathroom? And it's like, okay, Ben, what about it? How do we solve it? How do we solve this issue? What is your diagnosis? Like it's all spin, no substance in a lot of cases, and that's the thing that
he used to say something about like the military branches when they were initially going into those underneath Barack Obama for transgenders. He did say for a while, "Are you going to start having for bathhouses, basically? For one being for cis males, one being for cis females, one being for trans females, and one being for trans males." So that you would never have any overlap there. And it was like, clearly that was just like, that's an impossible thing to do for the sense of like Navy ships and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's what his original context was on. But
I
he
think
has
like
said things
I mean
like that before.
In that case, we don't have to get too deep into this. In that case, we're talking about purportedly what's supposed to be the most disciplined folks in the country. I feel like if they knew that they had a trans man in their ranks, I feel like they could be chill about it. And if they're not chill about it, then they have no business being in the U.S. military.
A lot of the military folks that have been interviewed have said stuff along the lines of, "I don't care if you're gay or whatever fighting alongside me, as long as we're fighting together, blah, blah, blah." It's a lot of the old veterans that you get, which is why it's like an old guard versus new guard type mentality in the military. Because a lot of the older guard is the ones that are like, no. And a lot of the younger people coming into it are like, are you going to fight with me or not?
So here's all of that to say, like, if I'm going to trust a news source, they need to be offering me some kind of substance. Robert Evans does that. He's on the streets with usually the first reporting of certain events that are happening, or certainly the most comprehensive. He's got a grounding in war reporting. He acknowledges his biases, and there's a lot of other folks like that I follow. So all that to say, like, where you get your media is very important with this.
Or at least follow multiple sources. Don't just listen to one.
Yeah, that's where we were going. Yeah, I actually downloaded. This isn't a shell. I know that they're advertising on people's sites. What's it called? Where's my phone? There is an app that I just found called. What's it called? Let me find it. I have an alert for it. Ground News. It's an app, and what it'll do is it'll show you the full spectrum of reporting on a given issue. So it'll give you MSNBC, it'll give you One American News Network, it'll give you the Daily Wire, it'll give you The Hill. You know, it'll give them all to you side by side on like a
Political,
spectrum. Yeah. For each individual story. So like for instance today, when Rush Limbaugh died, you've got some outlets saying Rush Limbaugh, revered conservative media personality, dead at 70. And then you have other people, other news sources saying Rush Limbaugh, conservative who railed against I don't know, somebody said this in my chat earlier, like known denier of the effects of cigarettes, dead at 70 of lung cancer. Like the different ways that things are reported. So chat, I'd encourage you to check that out. Andrew, if you want to check that out as well.
I saw that all through Facebook when he died. It was like you had stuff as simple as just like no conservative personality dead at 70 will be missed, and then you had like known, you know, bigot of blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 dead.
Known homophobe and AIDS denier. So as we're kind of winding, I think we've hit pretty much everything that we wanted. Oh, did you want to get into the impeachment trial at all?
Trying to get some QAnon experience there? No, the impeachment trial, in my opinion, was just, in all honesty, I understand the aspect of showing like, yo, this was bad, and I fully get that. But I feel like most people sitting back knew that it was a waste of time. Knew that.
Well,
like,
that's loaded language. I knew that he was going to be acquitted. I did not think it was going to be a waste of time.
So like, I fully get that. I was like, he's gonna get acquitted. I kind of sat back and was like, I don't see this as a completely necessary aspect of it. I think I would have honestly stood back and been like, I'm okay with this more had they done what Pelosi's trying to recommend now, which is doing the full scale investigation, doing witnesses, blah blah blah. I understand that looks bad on the party, supposedly, like the historical evidence of that is like it eventually makes it look like the party who's forcing the impeachment, they eventually just look worse and worse, which I don't care for that aspect. Like I think that's a kind of shitty mentality to take, to be like, Democrats are impeaching somebody, think badly of the Democrats. I feel like that would be the same with the other way around. If the Republicans were impeaching somebody, you shouldn't sit back and feel that the Republicans are wrong for doing it. And I feel like had Pelosi done that from the beginning, I would have been more into it, because then I would have been able to get more and more things of like, what did he do? What are these people who said that these things
talking about if Pelosi had announced the investigation right away?
Yeah, doing the full investigation that because they initially waffled with that. They said that
they waffled on whether or not Congress was going to be the one litigating it. The FBI was looking into it almost immediately, and then all of that evidence went to the House impeachment managers.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then they debated on whether or not to do the House integral investigation, which would be they would be subpoenaing people, pulling them in, asking questions for the sense of everything to then be pushed on as the documents for the Senate. But they kind of went with the other route, which was just this is the physical evidence that we have, and then we just have the anecdotal somebody said, not the we got specific aid, this is what was said, we got this.
Well, we do have that. That did because here's the weird and convenient thing about the Capitol riot. Half of the people who were in the Capitol were live streaming on their personal social media accounts.
Yeah, that's what
the reason
different angles.
The reason the legislators didn't have to do it on a legislative side is because the FBI already had all of the information that they needed.
But it wasn't presented in the way that whenever they had to present somebody, whenever they were like aide close to Trump said this, they weren't able to say specifically who and corroborate it and actually be like, we have the full thing of it, because of the fact that they were never subpoenaed, so they couldn't just say such and such person. And that's, to me, it was like, if you're going to do this, we need to have the full weight behind it.
Well, they were
more than just he said, she said, and that's just because it makes it seem easy to push out.
By your own admission, we all already knew that he was going to get acquitted.
I still wanted to see more because I want people to realize that maybe we should not put it back in.
Right, obviously. But when
That's my bigger take on that. Like, yeah, I feel like we
I
don't
think
use that.
the evidence that they supplied, that the House managers supplied, that evidence was substantial enough that what's his name, Castor, got up after the House impeachment managers' opening statements and was like, "Wow, that was way better than I thought it was going to be. It completely blew our plan out of the water. So now I have to improvise." He said that on the House on the Senate floor. They got
Yeah,
done
but
with
that's
their
also because they expected it just to be a cakewalk.
Yeah, they expected them to like have nothing, but the way that they did you watch like the 9-minute video that they put out? Like
I watched.
outlining well, did you watch any of the impeachment trial?
I watched. I didn't watch day one of them voting. Whether or not they could do it,
Mhm.
but I did see the results, and then I watched day two, technically parts of it while I was at work, which was the presentations of different videos. Same with day three. I watched part of day four for the defense. I watched a little bit more in day five, and then I saw the results of him being acquitted.
Mhm.
And I kind of didn't want to keep on watching for
Yeah,
the
I didn't
defense and also for the Democrat side of, hey, this is what he's done, because it just honestly hit a point to me where it was just such a rehash of the same videos again and again and again that I was just kind of like, okay, so the point's been made. Now you're just continuing to use time. Like, I get it, but
so no
the
matter
point was made.
I mean we and the Senate they didn't really, but we have to look at it from the point of consequentialism. Did what Trump did lead to people committing an insurrection in his name? They had people who said in the Capitol building, "We are here to overturn the election. There are a million of us outside, and we're doing it because Trump told us to."
Yep.
You have people saying that. So I think this trial, they could have called witnesses, they could have done subpoenas, but like you said, I agree with what you said. We needed to get this out of the way as quickly as possible because we all knew what the result was going to be. We all knew that trying to get the vote to convict him and then trying to get the vote to keep him from holding office again, the separate vote after the conviction, trying to get those is a waste of time. But going through the process of the trial, putting forward enough evidence that he could be convicted, it's very, very obvious that he wanted this, that he set it into motion, and that it would not have happened were he not to have brought the people there, pointed them at the Capitol, and then like pulled the pin on the grenade. I think
Yeah, I don't stand with the idea of, like, I mean, I get the whole him calling them there and being like, say what you want to say and all that, but I don't like the call. I don't like any of the senators I've seen or any of the president or anybody going when they constantly just go, get in their face, fight like hell, fight like hell. I'm like, no, you're all calling for potential of somebody to take that to such an askew.
No, I don't think that's true. I think that, I mean, here's it. I'm gonna try and not get too aggressive with this because I like you and I know that you're a reasonable guy. The main contention that I have with the way that you approach politics and discourse is that whenever you see something happen, you will kind of sit back and like cross your fingers and go, oh, well, then we also need to condemn the other side. And that's something that the Republicans are doing a lot too. With Marjorie Taylor Greene right now, the crazy QAnon lady that's in Congress,
Yeah.
getting
Yes.
stripped of her power for calling for the deaths of her now colleagues.
No, she actively deserves all that. The whole deli Jew laser, what are you gonna do? I'm like,
Yeah,
are
the
you,
crazy
like, are you
QAnon later
serious?
saying that the best solution for getting Pelosi out of office is a bullet to the back of the head. Like,
Yeah, no, that's
yeah,
ridiculous. And this is
but for
like,
it's
no.
it's we can condemn that without also doing what the Republicans are doing and saying, okay, well then in that case, Ilhan Omar has said that, maybe we shouldn't support the actions of Israel. So and like anyone who has ever said the word fight on the Democratic side also needs to be disbarred and like removed from their seats. I think that we can approach this with some nuance and say, okay, these things are really, really bad and deserving of condemnation and consequences, and these other things that are like marginally similar and use kind of the same language but didn't achieve the same result don't. I think we can do that. I think that having this standard of, oh, well, Trump said we need to fight for our beliefs and then pointed a mob at the Capitol, I think we can say that that's not the same as any Democrat who's ever said we need to fight for our beliefs. Because it's not him saying fight, fight, fight that led them to the Capitol. It's him propagating the lie that the election was stolen, which the Democrats have not done ever.
Well, we do know of voter fraud that has happened, but never to such an extent to actually sway anything. And most of the time it's been caught and then, corrected. And there's no way to say that any one side has perpetuated it. And that's why I'm just like...
I saw there's a database that you can look up on all litigated cases of voter fraud. Like basically anytime anyone's ever been actually indicted for it.
Yeah.
There's a full database, and it's upkept by the Department of Justice, so Trump appointees. Take a guess on how many cases... What's that?
It's literally for the exact reason to make sure that we are not constantly dealing with it happening, and it's like, we don't. It doesn't constantly happen.
Yeah, certainly. So in the 2020 election, give me a guess on how many cases of indicted voter fraud there were.
Oh god, it's probably only like 20.
It's under a dozen.
Yeah.
And a couple, to be fair, a couple of them were like people trying to solicit a couple thousand votes from people.
Yeah, I remember the biggest one that I initially heard and then was like, okay, no, they're actually proving that this was happening, was out in Las Vegas. And supposedly these people were getting brought up where they were running a little scheme where they were getting people who recently had moved out of Vegas as to vote in Vegas. And it was like, that was the biggest one that I had heard of, and them actually going, yeah, no, we can actually kind of like prove this. But like a lot of the other ones where it was like, oh, this dead person voted here, this dead person voted there. It's like,
yeah, no, those
zero proof behind it.
All of the people, all of the cases where people have been like, oh yeah, dead person voted. It's never been that. There's a couple different ways that it can get tabulated that way. One is when you've got, there was the one lady who voted as like Mrs. Jonathan Swift or something. I forget the exact name. And then it accidentally got counted in a clerical error as Mr. Jonathan Smith.
Yeah.
So like they went to her house to arrest Mr. Jonathan Smith, and then she was like, no, it was me. He's been dead for 20 years,
Yeah.
Or you've got like juniors voting and it getting tabulated as seniors, or you've got people who like they said that they were dead but they're not. There hasn't been a single confirmed case of a dead person having registered a vote that wasn't a clerical error or an error on the part of the actual person voting. But it's never resulted in an actual extra vote being tallied. It's just another vote that Gina Carano could beat up any liberal on the planet. Change my mind. I bet you I could find one. David GL, thank you. Welcome to the stream. I appreciate your input.
That's a very blanket statement. She could beat up anyone. Okay. So
any liberal? I feel like I could probably find a really fucking strong liberal. All right. What's Ronda Rousey's political beliefs? All right. I need Ronda Rousey's political beliefs stat. I don't follow MMA. Is she still doing MMA? But yeah, I think that we can have some nuance in talking about this without like, I don't know, she's probably conservative now that she got canceled. That's probably true.
Ronda Rousey's not really the greatest of great fighters, but still, it's just find any other liberal fighter.
I don't know. How about this, David GL? If you join the Discord, I'll get back to you. I'll do some research. And then we can do like a death battle style like strategy game. This is getting kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I think that, like I said, my main contention with the way that, with your approach to politics is gesturing at, hey, David GL, thank you for the follow. You'll like find something that's inconvenient to, I mean, as far as what I've seen from, this isn't like a gotcha or anything, like I said, but mostly conservatives. Whenever something happens to a conservative and they're held accountable, you'll usually like look, and it's not just you, it's a lot of people in our current media ecosystem. They'll look for like other people who have done things that are like not nearly as bad as that, but have like kind of the same rhetoric. And they'll go, okay, well then these people then. Like it's just whataboutism. It's like, well, what about Ilhan Omar? We need to remove her from her seats. Or, oh, what about Pedro Pascal? He said something about the Holocaust once. Like,
Well, that's just the easiest, then and then to be like, okay, Disney, why? But like, I can understand. But like I said, for me, I don't sit back and install either one is exactly that bad. But I would have gotten her for something else. The other end of it, like I just said, like, come on, you shouldn't be saying that, and as a brand image, it's not the greatest.
I think I'm pretty sure I've already seen this. I think that having the Holocaust denialism as the bridge too far for Disney makes sense. They can kind of sweep the transfer, because the transphobia stuff was a little more. It wasn't quite as mask off. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, making fun of somebody for having pronouns in their bio. Oh, and then there was the story where she talked to Pedro Pascal, and then she was like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, when one of Pedro's family members came out.
Well, that was the same day that she got fired. I'm talking about, this was back in, when did she make the beep boop bop thing? Like 2019?
No, that's what made her pull it away. If I remember correctly, for what I had read, that's what made her pull it away, because she initially had put in beep boop bop after being harassed supposedly about needing to put it in, and then she removed it at one point after speaking to Pedro Pascal about a family member that had come out, and then that's what had made her take away that out of her bio, because she was like, oh, okay, I can understand this more.
Okay. Yeah,
which is more of a mentality that I take, where it's like, I take a lot more of a mentality of educate, not through hate.
Oh yeah, certainly.
And it's like, I can understand you being like, oh yes, I took the mentality of step back, and I'm like, 100%. I take the mentality of step back and look. I don't want to get into anybody's face, but I would like to speak to a lot of them and educate and speak through and see what I can do. Like, I would love to talk to AOC at some point, just because her ideas are so radically away from mine that I'm like, please, let's talk. Like, her comment about the Green New Deal would have saved Texas. I'm like, come on.
Well, I need to look into the whole Texas thing more. I think the main thing with Texas is they've got their own power grid that's mostly powered by like coal and natural gas, and that
they have 4 main systems. They have the conventional old system, natural gas, wind turbines, and solar panels. And the areas that are the most affected right now for the power outages and stuff like that are areas that were mostly being fed with natural gas and the old coal burning systems.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they were failing is because they were getting the systems got too cold, and literally all the instruments that they needed to regulate the power grid started failing.
Yep.
Once they dropped it below some degree amount. I don't remember what. And it was like, then the power grid that was trying to work was trying to sustain this whole area off of like 85% of what the grid was able to do. And it then just started shutting down and having those spotty blackouts. So then AOC made the comment, the Green Deal would have saved you. And that's when you have the debate right now back and forth between Republicans and AOC going, Republicans of Texas, mind you, and AOC, where they were like, our green energy is also failing us right now because the wind turbines froze.
Yeah, I think it was
And
only what 6% of the total power outages were from the wind farms.
yes, because the majority of it is around major cities. And
You know what
I
still
remember
works under wintry conditions? Solar panels and nuclear. Haha.
the solar panels actually in their area got too covered.
Yeah, those are easy to snow blow off, right?
Yes, but that was something else that they brought into.
Mm.
The wind turbines were the damaged part. Apparently,
Yeah.
the warm time turbines are like totally destroyed.
Yeah, if your wind
Um,
turbines ice up, they're pretty much they're fucked for a little bit.
And so the whole, in my opinion, the whole optics of her saying the Green Deal would have saved you. It's like, girl, don't say that right now. Like,
Yeah,
I get that most
if-
of the blackouts are in an area that's not through green energy, but the green energy is also having trouble there because Texas's infrastructure was not made to be as cold
Yeah.
as it was.
If she phrased it like that, then I that's kind of cringe to me because she I said right before right after the Rush Limbaugh thing and right before I got on the call with you that I've seen a lot of people who are like, well, you know, everyone out in Texas is conservative and they all voted for Trump and they all love their oil and natural gas.
So
So
not
like,
true.
I guess they can just be cold now. Like it's not that cold. And we don't need to do that. And I think if she took that opportunity to be like, well, if you had instituted my Green New Deal sooner, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I think that's kind of tasteless. I do agree with that. I largely support AOC in most of the stuff that she does, but that does seem kind of tasteless to me.
Here you go. You absolutely love to see it. This, along with record low interest rates, means it's time to work. Time for a worker-led mass investment in green infrastructure to save our planet. Cough. In response to, oh no, this is the oil response. Hang on, give me the Texas response. This is the oil response of them attacking Texas for the oil. It's a Green Deal, Texas.
So if I eat a cattail, will I die? I don't think so, Enclave. I think you'll be fine. Why, did you see the video of like all the white stuff coming out of the cattail? Because that's kind of crazy.
Okay, here we go. The infrastructure failures in Texas are quite literally what happen when you don't pursue a Green New Deal. Weak on sweeping next-gen public infrastructure investments, little focus on equity, so communities are left behind, climate deniers in leadership so they don't long prep for disaster. We need to help people now. Long term, we must realize there are consequences of inaction. But it's like, I can kind of stand behind the second point being like, hey, yeah, we need to, you know, continue to think and prepare for different climate experiences that could happen. But the first one being like the infrastructure failures in Texas are quite literally what happened when you don't pursue a Green New Deal. Ouch.
I think that phrasing is a little more. It's still kind of yikesy to me, but I think that's a little bit more defensible than what I was thinking. That first tweet that you read out that was like, "Oh well, maybe this is a this is a good opportunity to you should have done the Green New Deal." Like that one was a little cringier to me. But
Yeah,
I don't think
like,
we need to quite get into the weeds on this.
I do understand that it's like most of what has caused Texas blackouts being not green energy, but that's also because most of Texas's grid isn't on green energy. The thing that I read earlier said that like 15% of their energy comes from solar, and about 10 to 15% of it comes from windmills. So in total, at most, you got 30% of the grid of the entire state of Texas coming from green energy. But that's mostly for like the boonies and a lot of the farms and a lot of things like that. Apparently, a lot of the main cities still, like Austin, Dallas, and everything like that, are still running on the more traditional systems because they're able to output what the cities need.
Alpha Elves, welcome to the stream. You say stop cancel culture. I regret to inform you that we've moved past that. But I'll kind of give you the synopsis. What we call cancel culture is usually confined to getting criticized on Twitter, and politicians getting yelled at in restaurants and such. When people are held accountable for their actions, especially public figures like Gina Carano, like prominent politicians, like say I had another one in my head and I lost it. That's okay. You get the idea. When people like that are held accountable and face consequences for the things that they do and say, if they're outside the brand of their employer, or if their employer feels like that reflects badly on them, I think that they have every right to fire those people. That's the free market, baby. That's at-will employment.
Yeah, which we still have plenty of states that are very much in that line.
Mm-hmm. All right, my man. I think we went over just about everything that we wanted to. Do you have any parting thoughts or memes that you want to share with the chat?
No, I'm good. Just be nice to your fellow man. That's really it. That's mostly my take. It's like, I don't like seeing hypocrisy things, and I don't want anybody just to get hurt. It's like, if you disagree with them, educate them. If you can't, leave.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more you can do to just deny ignorance that is out there.
Mm-hmm. I think I think this is kind of the fundamental difference. Just to close out my end, I think that we should be able to. Obviously, our first response should be, like in the case of Gina Carano and the trans thing. I think if we explain it to them and they're like, "Oh man, I didn't realize that," like, we should never cancel people or like criticize people harshly for ignorance.
Yeah, don't attack for ignorance.
Mm-hmm. But if they double down on that, like J.K. Rowling did, pray for Rush Limbaugh, bro. That bitch dead. I crab raved for that earlier, Alpha Elves. You missed it. We can get into that in a second, Alpha Elves. Don't you worry. I think if they don't take the opportunity, and this is what I was saying in our original post, if they don't take that opportunity to learn, to grow as a person, to develop a new perspective, especially if it's something that like they're facing outrage over, and then they double down on it like J.K. Rowling did, I think that's indefensible, and I think that people should face consequences, like minor consequences for that. I don't think they should be hurt. I don't think that they should be out of work for life or whatever.
To swing this back around to what you said earlier, do something like the James Gunn situation when the chat brought this up. He eventually learned what he was saying was not in good taste, and he got away from it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I get back and I go, I can understand them staying behind him because he's changed away from that. But I can also understand them being like, you were a bad image. I don't want to keep you as that image. But like me personally, if I ever met him, I wouldn't go, oh, you're a bad dude. It's like, no, he moved away from it. He's not actively going to look at me and make a freaking pedo rape joke.
Right. Yeah, and this is what I think I said this on your post too. If they come back in 2 years and Gina Carano is like, hey, I realized that Holocaust Instagram post was kind of cringy. I now realize that was pretty insensitive of me to do. My bad. I'll refrain from saying stuff like that in the future. I'd bring her back for a cameo in like the New Republic or whatever. Like, that's fine. Yeah. As long as we're encouraging people, to be better rather than encouraging society to be worse, I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I sit back in the level of just, I want constant debate, and I want constant debate without hate, and I want constant debate without like violence. But I understand that it can lead to that. But that's just what I like. Mm-hmm. That's what I like to take into people. It's like, because eventually you're either going to have an appreciation from the other side, or you're going to have an understanding of the other side. And as long as we don't get to the point of wanting to point guns to each other's heads, then this is what you need. You need constantly open speaking, disagreements, and stuff like that, because that's how things continue to evolve and how we don't stagnate as people. But I also don't want to see us get back to the point of like, when all the jokes of Civil War II were coming up, it's like, no, let's not get back to that, people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, accelerationism is not the answer. Increasing people's material conditions to the point where they do not feel the need to go down that road, where we actually like have representative democracy that works for the people. I think that's the goal. That'll stop all of this accelerationist shit from happening.
Yeah, like we said, actually being able to have senators be held accountable. We can never get to a point of that where it's like, you can't just sit there and do whatever you want. You actually have to constantly answer to your people.
Mhm.
It's like that's needed.
All right, man.
Right now we're in a situation where that's not a thing,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
All right, man. I could get into this with you for like another 2 hours, but honestly, I'm gonna have to sleep soon, and I know you likely do as well. Thank you
I
so
got
much
you,
for
man.
coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Have a good day.
All right, be well, man. All right, folks. I think that went really well. This is a guy no sleep, true Enclave. This is a guy that I used to play D&D with. I think that he is though we disagree on many things, I think that he is a lovely and charitable person. Yeah, that was Andrew, everybody.